I met Jake in '98 in Denver, along with Skylar. I met him when I first went out there to the show, and I'm really honored that he is here today to present knowledge, because I'm so honored that he came here today. So he will be doing a little presentation on Highlands right over here, and I'm sure you'll learn a lot more from Jake than you learn from me. Thank you.
Eddie is just a wealth of information. If you can corner him at some point during these couple of days, you're going to just get a treasure trove of knowledge. So we will transition now over to the heifer pen there. There's 3 heifers in the corral. A lot of you know me, but some of you don't. I first got involved, my parents got involved in Highland cattle in the mid-1990s, and in Washington State, 20-acre farm in Washington State. We had about 30 cows, purebred cattle for seed stock, and we started just with the idea of producing some beef, and just wanted some mountain cows, because we were at high elevation and in a very snowy kind of region in Washington State, and so we wanted something compatible with the place we lived in. And so we decided Highland cattle would be the thing that we would get. And very early on, I took to the cows and came eventually to almost dominate the whole cattle scene on our farm. Managed the cattle actually for our family in my teens, and ran our show operation, and we ended up showing quite a lot and did pretty well with it. So I've been showing Highland cattle since I don't know, probably 1998 or something like that. Went to the National Western Stock Show for the first time, as Eddie said, I think in 98 or 99, and then showed there for the first time in 2000. And I've either shown or shown for other people or fitted cattle there for people for every single year since then. So I have a lot of show experience, some beef background. I have an animal science degree from Washington State, animal husbandry. Did an internship in northern England for 6 months on a Highland cattle operation there that was doing both beef and breeding stock in a big way, and we're shipping cattle all over the UK. So I got to see a lot of different farms. I got to firsthand see how the English and the Scots like to manage their Highland cattle. And that was very educational. Some shocking things for me culturally, cattle culturally, and it was just good exposure. So with all that said about myself, let's talk about selecting Highland cows. So with any breed of cattle, the first thing I think you need to realize that is that there is no perfect cow. This is going to burst somebody's bubble out here, I'm sure. You came thinking that I was going to tell you how to pick a perfect cow. But actually, there are no perfect cows. There are only good cows for different situations. So what I mean by that is, I think a starting place in selection is to identify what your goals are and what your operation circumstances are. Where do you live? Do you have bottomland, lowland, lush pasture, woodlot, mountain terrain, rangeland? You know, all these things are their own environment and require a different set of cattle to maximize your efficiency and productivity on that particular area. Start with the end in mind. If you know what your resources are, then you can match your cattle accordingly, and that's going to shape how you select your cattle, what you start to breed for and look for, and this makes sense business-wise, because if you're fighting your land and you're fighting your system, you're going to end up with not a very profitable situation. So think about what you have. So if you've identified that what you need is Highland cattle, and that's probably where you're at, you're here, for your particular situation, then you need to start thinking about how to select good Highland cattle. And the first thing I want to say is that you want to start with good structure, good bone structure. Without that, you don't have a whole lot. The cows have to last a long time, or you're not going to get your money out of them. And so bone structure really dictates the longevity of your cattle. Highlands, they're all over the charts with structure. We have 3 examples here of different types. This heifer here, this dun, she's structurally a really sound heifer. Has most things right where you want them. She's a good example of what we want. So I'll kind of focus on her when we're talking about the positive side of things. The black heifer, she has her strengths, she has her weaknesses. We'll kind of compare and contrast those a bit. In the back we have a crossbred Hereford Highland, I'm told. I think they're all somewhat similar age. I don't know if anybody knows differently, but yearling heifers. So these are great examples, just a lot of diversity of type here. So we want to start with what? I'm going to ask you. What should we start with? Feet. Great answer. We start with feet, and we start with feet because they're what the cow's standing on her whole life. If her feet go out, his feet go out, you don't have a breeding animal anymore. So we want to have a solid hoof on our cattle, and by a solid hoof, I mean we want to have some heel. Heel structure is really important. So there is a tendency in the breed to have pretty flat feet. There's certain lines that are a little better heeled than others. And I would say as breeders and people trying to improve the breed, you should be seeking out feet. And it's like it's maybe the most neglected, one of the most neglected things I would say in appraising cattle. You just kind of glance at them and like, ooh, that's a good one. I did this the other day, I confess. So I was walking out in somebody's herd and I'm like, oh, there's the one. It's just from here to the barn, and walk over there and I was like, oh no, that's just terrible feet. And so, but that's a total out for me. Like she can have the body, but if she doesn't have the feet, that's a no-go. So the reasons, and this is what I want to do through this whole thing, is give you reasons for the selection criteria, because that's often I find in the show ring, it's a neglected area where the judge is just flinging these like funky words out there that's kind of judge jargon that nobody really understands. And so I'm going to try to break down some of that terminology and help you understand the practical implications of the terms that are being used. Anyway, back to feet. The practical reason for having a lot of heel is that it changes the angle of the foot. So if you have a lot of heel under the hoof slope will go down like this. If it's shallow heeled, then the toes are going to go out like this, and they're not going to break off. They're not going to wear down the way they should, especially on soft ground. If you're not on very rocky soil, that's going to be a really big issue for you. So the other thing is, if you have more heel, you're getting the vulnerable parts of the foot higher off the ground. So that septum, that cleft between the hard parts of the hoof, can get thorns, it can get rocks, it can get bruise in there. And if you're real shallow footed, you're closer to danger all the time. So you want a good foot that's keeping them up out of the way of danger. So along with that, good curvature of the foot. It's coming to a point that wears off. They should have a split in the middle, kind of that comes almost closed in the front, and some gap in there. All of these heifers have pretty good feet. You might just kind of walk around afterwards and look at them, comparing them to what I'm saying. The Hereford cross heifer probably has the best heel of the group, which is one of the only redeeming things I can say say about her. So, yeah, this thing didn't squeak this morning. I don't know. We want to just progress through the cow. I'm going to just progress through the structure of this heifer, and let's talk about the pasterns. So, you'll hear a judge say sometimes, this bull is popping in the pasterns. I placed him under this bull because, you know, on all points of merit, he's very comparable, but he pops in his pasterns. Is that a cosmetic thing, or is this a big deal? It's probably a bigger deal than you might suspect, because what you have in a popping pastern, I don't know if any of you have seen this, but basically, when it's something you see in the rear legs, where when they set the foot down, they're locked, and then as they apply weight to the leg, it pops down and sets the pastern, and it just all of a sudden goes down. Well, it's a lot of force and torque tension on that pastern joint every time, and that's every step that big bull is making. He's going to wear those pasterns down, and he's going to get lower and lower and eventually be dragging his ankles on the ground. So we want cattle that can last. And so we want to see a pastern that has an appropriate angle. You see that the pastern on this dun heifer is just a little bit more angular than the leg is, and that's about how you want it. Not too shallow, not too steep. And that brings us to another point. So talk about angularity. Judge will say, this heifer's too angular. I'd like to see her have a little less angle. What's he mean by, or she mean by, angularity? So there's various ways to translate that. Usually it means from the profile they're like sickle hocked, which is this leg coming too far forward, this angle from here to here being too severe an angle. And the other thing it sometimes means is that they can be like cow hocked. That's less common, but cow hocked is another term where the feet point out, that they're kind of knock-kneed, and they're doing this splayed kind of paddling motion as they walk. Both of these are problems structurally because they really compromise stability. And what I found with our cows, we've had some that were that way in past years, and like I said, it's a mountainous region. We get a lot of ice. There was one cow in particular that we had purchased that didn't last too long in the program because she would get on the snow and ice and just start spinning out. She wasn't under herself in the proper way, and because of the angle of her legs, all the weight was shunting these legs out to the sides, and so she's like constantly trying to save herself from doing the splits on the ice. It's really a dangerous situation. I literally saw a dairy cow do it one time on ice and break her pelvis. So it's a dangerous thing. So we don't really think about that usually in terms of how long the cow lasts, but it's a really legitimate point. So still on the subject of angularity, there's a reverse problem. The reverse problem is that sometimes they're too straight. So the term, the judge jargon for that is post-legged, and it's become quite an issue in show cattle. And over the years, there's been some breeds that have developed their breeding, the breed's overall breeding philosophy to match the show arena. The classic example is the Shorthorn breed, and Shorthorns used to be very, very popular in the U.S., one of the most popular breeds, and unfortunately they took that route of just trying to please the popular trend that judges were looking for, that also the market steer industry was looking for, because they were using them as a cross for the production of market steers. And what they ended up doing, because judges wanted really boxy cattle, really stylish cattle for the show arena, they bred them straighter and straighter and straighter in the back legs, and they ended up getting really high pin bones up here which tends to compromise calving if you have really high pin bones. You want, we'll talk about this, I guess, but you want the right position on your pin bones. But the leg structure down here, if it's too straight, will be straight all the way up through these joints. You have a stifle joint, hock joint, pastern joint, and the pin hip pin joint. And if that is too straight, what you have is a jackhammer effect. Every step the cow is taking, they're ramming those joints, and there's not enough flexibility to ease that pressure. And so it's probably on the scale of bad attributes and things to avoid, is probably worse than being a little too angular, in that especially in heavier cattle, they're going to break down pretty fast. The average, I don't know what the average shorthorn today, the lifespan is on them, but a lot of them are breaking down really fast. So keep that in mind. I'm seeing this in the Highland world. So I'm being honest, I'm a show person. I know that this is a trend. Judges are looking for big, boxy, stylish cattle. Again, breed true to your goals. Don't follow the show trends when they don't make practical sense. So this presentation is all about practical application of these terms.